Gabriella and welcome to CLEM News at 5. One of our leading headlines is on the increased militarization of the U.S. police across the nation. The U.S. government has implemented a program called the 1033 program, which supplies local police forces with military weaponry identical to that of the U.S. military in the Middle East. Today, we are joined by Kimmy to discuss the program and its repercussions on America as a nation. Kimmy, good evening, and thank you for being here today.
Thank you, Gabriella. It's great to be here tonight.
How do you feel about the increased militarization of the U.S. police? Is it as big of a problem as the media makes it out to be?
This excessive force used by U.S. police is an extremely hot topic right now. People in the public have been noticing that our police forces have been taking on a militaristic role, and they are concerned because of this lack of trust between citizens and police.
Men in Kevlar vests and helmets, camouflage, carrying automatic rifles, moving in tactical armored vehicles. These aren't American troops on the battlefield, but police.
Wearing riot gear, holding machine guns, and looking an awful lot like the U.S. military. And that's because today they are a lot like the military.
One observer says he thought he saw police in an MRAP. MRAPs have made their way from Afghanistan and Iraq to local police forces in America just over the past couple of years.
The Department of Homeland Security is giving out MRAPs to local police departments. They're mine-resistant armor protection vehicles that they use in Afghanistan. They're basically tanks. The other thing that I've talked to policemen who are concerned about this is the training. They're training policemen now very militarily in the police academies across the country, and actually SWAT teams are studying with military units. The other factor is that a lot of returning veterans from overseas are becoming police officers. So what you're getting is what the founding fathers, Madison, George Washington, all warned about a standing army. They say never do this because they experience what would be the tyranny of a standing army.
During the late 70s, Congress passed legislation called Posse Comitatus, barring the military from operating on American soil. And in the early 80s, there was an effort to circumvent that in Congress by arming police with military-grade weaponry.
Can you give our viewers a brief history of the 1033 program and how it came into existence?
With an expanded military and the presence of a drug crisis that Congress regarded as one that was worsening in 1990, they enacted the National Defense Authorization Act. Included in this act is the 1033 program, which was initially Section 1208 and allowed the Secretary of Defense to transfer personal property of the Department of Defense, including small arms and ammunition, to federal and state agencies.
So can you explain what exactly this entails and how it's affecting the police force of the United States?
The 1033 program was passed to allow the government to provide police departments all across the nation with military-style weaponry, including tanks and other tracked armored vehicles, weaponized aircraft and vehicles, firearms and ammunition, grenade launchers, bayonets, riot gear, and explosives. The Pentagon has given out billions of dollars worth of weapons to all departments over the last few years. But they're also providing things such as cots, emergency blankets, and other non-weapon materials that police departments need. The result of all this weaponry is a feeling of hostility between the police as public servants and the American public. With the increase in military weapons, police in general gain a more militaristic view of how to police our people. Police begin to treat an average American like a wartime enemy and react with much more force than they would have if they weren't surrounded by war-related objects.
There's what they call the psychology of compliance. A number of studies show that once you put on that gear as a policeman and you're trained, you start acting like a military unit, like you're in a patrol. And unfortunately, what happens is the psychology changes in a lot of these local policemen when they're approaching a house for a SWAT team raid. It's like they're moving in on Al-Qaeda. That's what you have. That's what the studies show, and they've been confirmed.
The Defense Department says just in 2013, nearly $450 million worth of military equipment was given to law enforcement.
The surplus program is critical to smaller departments, giving them all kinds of equipment, trucks, lights, and generators they couldn't afford otherwise.
Watchdog groups say many of these police departments lack the training in how to use these weapons responsibly, and that often escalates the dangers. But current and former police say criminals have increasingly more firepower, and law enforcement can't afford to be outgunned.
In addition to the bayonets, firearms, and other military-style weapons, police have been using LRAD sound cannons during these protests. Can you give us a little bit of information about these dangerous devices?
The LRAD sound cannon is an acoustic hailing device that sends messages over long distances and higher volumes than a normal loudspeaker. They have many uses, one of which is for crowd control. The police have been using these during protests to control the riots, and while the LRAD sound cannon is effective at this, it also causes permanent damage to hearing. Since LRADs can blast above a person's 120 decibel discomfort mark and their 130 decibel threshold for potential hearing loss, there's no telling what the consequences of encountering an LRAD may be for protesters. One woman sued the Pittsburgh Police Department for permanent damage caused by an LRAD. They are dangerous and should not be used on innocent civilians for their own safety.
We're going to ensure that departments have what they need, but also that they have the training to use it.
When you surround yourself with the equipment of war, with the language of war, with the tactic of war, you're going to be much less likely to look for ways of resolving disputes using the least amount of force possible.
Law enforcement agencies go on a Department of Defense website and look for used equipment.
It looks good. I mean, the picture. 1,500 miles. Oh, it's just a two-seater.
On the day we went to McMinn County, they were looking for Humvees.
How many of those did you put in for? 3 of those and 1 truck?
Departments pay a registration fee. Then all the equipment is free.
Ultimately, what do you think the solution is to our policing problem?
I think the only way we can gain trust back between the people and their police forces, and to aid this problem of extreme militarization of police departments, is to cut down on the handout of these military-style weapons. Obama has begun moving in the right direction by banning and restricting some of these weapons and requiring more advanced training. We need to cut back on the number of weapons given out, and we need to go back to training our police forces without a militaristic view.
We're going to prohibit some equipment made for the battlefield that is not appropriate for local police departments.
All right, Miss Santa, that's all the time we have for today. Thank you so much for your time with us. This is Gabriella Schoenbeck reporting for CLEM News at 5. Thank you and good night.
Today, the program is much stricter.
Sheriff Guy keeps his guns locked up and hasn't lost any. But for some, a rural department with 5 times more guns than patrol officers raises questions about the program.
After riots turned the streets of Ferguson, Missouri into what looked like a combat zone, with local police dressed in camouflage and controlling crowds with armored vehicles.
Many of the police forces actually think that this is what the equipment would be good for, is riot suppression in a big city, in an urban area, and you're specifically instructed that it's not for that. The NPR investigation of the 1033 program, they list that 12,000 bayonets have been given out. What purpose are bayonets being given out for?
Senator, bayonets are available under the program. I can't answer what a local police force would need a bayonet.
I can give you an answer, none.